will take place, the 2022 International Ministerial Conference on Freedom of Religion or Belief. Government representatives from over 50 countries have been invited, together with faith and civil society representatives, to discuss the concerning global trend of increasing restrictions on freedom of religion or belief, and also, it is hoped, to commit to practical steps to tackle this. A session including digital persecution should be at the cutting edge of this conference. My purpose in calling today's debate is to highlight why. Millions of people each year around the world are increasingly having their freedom of religion or belief restricted, and to devastating impact. A key reason is the increase in persecution by authoritarian regimes, including through the misuse of technology. Right across the world today, people are losing their jobs, education, homes, livelihoods, families, freedom, access to justice, even life itself, simply on account of what they believe. People are being discriminated against, marginalised, beaten, threatened, tortured and killed, and too often by their own governments, the very governments with a duty to protect their freedom of religion or belief. And the gross scale of this as a global issue is both under-recognised and under-addressed. One of the aims of this July's conference in London is to change this. The research centre Pew indicates that 83% of the world's population live in countries with high or very high restrictions on religion. The campaigning charity Open Doors, in their 2022 World Watch List, state that the persecution of Christians has now reached the highest levels since the World Watch List began nearly 30 years ago, and that across 76 countries, more than 360 million Christians suffer high or very high levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith. And of course, persecution does not only affect Christians, but those of all faiths and none. In Nigeria last month, the humanist Mubarak Bala was sentenced to 24 years in prison, now on appeal. And recently, the plight of Jehovah's Witnesses, Ahmadiyya Muslims and Baha'is across the world have been highlighted by the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance of 35 countries, which I have the privilege of chairing in 2022. Details can be found on the US State Department website. Why is freedom of religion or belief so important? We need to ask this question and to try to answer it, to set in context this debate on digital persecution and why addressing it is therefore so critical. Freedom of religion or belief, or FoRB for short, is important for several reasons. It's important in itself for us as individuals, because what we believe gives us a sense of worth, of purpose, meaning, of dignity, of identity. It goes to the heart of what makes us human. Freedom of religion or belief is important, and the importance of respecting it is important, because it is so closely connected with other human rights, such as free speech and the right to assemble, the right to work, even the right to life itself. When freedom of religion or belief is not respected by those in authority, all too often other rights crumble too. And FoRB, freedom of religion or belief, is important for communities. They are stronger, including economically, when they include everyone. Societies cannot fully develop when they oppress members of minorities. Freedom of religion or belief is one of the foundations of a stable and secure democratic society. Countries which respect FoRB are less prone to violent extremism. Not, I believe, to put too grand a point on it, promoting and defending freedom of religion or belief is an important element of promoting peace globally. Indeed, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt, one of the driving forces behind the establishment of the UN, envisioned a world of peaceful coexistence between nations, he stressed the importance of 4 freedoms: freedom of expression, freedom from want, freedom from fear, and freedom of belief. How tragic that we reflect on this today, as the very opposite is occurring less than 3 hours plane flight from here. And let us be under no illusions. The issue of freedom of religion or belief is very much a live issue in the plight of the Ukrainian people. Permit me, if you would, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to take a moment aside to refer to this. In the Russian rebel-held area of Ukraine, Luhansk, taken by pro-Russian separatists in 2014, freedom of religion or belief is now severely restricted. Religious communities need to register to have permission to gather, following a restrictive law making it illegal for any religious community to congregate without such permission. As a result, all Baptists, Seventh-day Adventists, Pentecostal and other Protestant communities have been denied this permission. Such unregistered groups therefore meet to worship in a climate of fear, subject to surveillance, at risk of repeated raids, with their social welfare activities to their local communities banned, and with an increasing list of allegedly extremist books being banned, including from the Bible an edition of the Gospel of John. I will give way.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, can I just first of all congratulate the Honourable Lady for Congleton for all that she does in her role as envoy and express her interest as chair of the APPG on freedom of religious belief. The Honourable Lady is right to highlight the issues that are happening in Ukraine, which also include, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say it, indications and incidents of Baptist pastors who have disappeared and have never been located, so their whereabouts are unknown. Churches have been destroyed, and I have people from my constituency, Mr. Deputy Speaker, who are actively involved in faith and action missions in eastern Ukraine, and what they expressed to me it goes along with what the Honourable Lady has said, and I think we do have to highlight these things in this House. It's not just the murder of innocents, it's the persecution of Christians and those of other religious beliefs as well. So Russia has to be held accountable in the highest court of the land for their genocidal campaign that they're carrying out against Ukrainians in Ukraine.
Well, the honourable member, the chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Freedom of Religion or Belief, makes excellent points, and I thank him for doing so. It's so important that we do highlight that the right to freely practice their religions or beliefs, whatever they may be, are a key aspect of what the leadership of Ukraine and its people are fighting for today. We applaud and stand with them. Returning now specifically to the subject of today's debate, digital persecution. I want to put on record my appreciation and thanks to Open Doors for the recent conference which they organised, partnering with the Universities of Birmingham and Roehampton, inviting papers on 3 core themes: surveillance, censorship and disinformation. I also want to thank many of those who contributed to that conference and to my speech today. Thank you to those who have supplied papers. My speech is all too short to do justice to this issue. So I urge parliamentary colleagues and others listening to this debate to access online the conference, which was recorded by Open Doors, and also to access the open source of papers available by the contributors, including Professor Francis Davis of Birmingham University, Dr. Evelina Ochar, author Jeremy Peckham, Dr. Pasquale Anicino of the University of Foggia, Chung-Ching Kwong of the University of Hamburg, Dr. Daniel Aguirre of the University of Roehampton, Rahima Mahout, UK Director of the World Uyghur Congress, and others. Technology and its extensive communication capabilities can, of course, be used for good, as we all saw during the pandemic. But as Open Doors state, digital technology enhances state capacity for surveillance of religious minorities and censorship of their speech. It also greatly assists the spread of disinformation against religious minorities by state and non-state actors, which can have lethal consequences for those minorities. Misuse of technology has played a crucial role in some of the most egregious atrocities perpetrated in recent years, including the persecution of the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, China, of the Rohingyas in Myanmar, and the Yazidis in Iraq. Religious minorities are often subject to state surveillance, often by the very nature of them being minorities. This can either be targeted surveillance of specific individuals or groups, or mass surveillance of large groups of people. This may include CCTV, including facial and emotional recognition, device listening, spyware, state monitoring of social networks, tracking, proximity and location apps, and large-scale data harvesting. And I shall explain some of this in a little more detail later. Examples of digital censorship include publication banning, disabling websites and applications, blocking websites, communications and social media posts, including state moderation and firewalls, punishing users who visit particular websites, hacking, cancelling of activities, platforms and public personae, often without reason or redress, and financial freezing. And disinformation is the communication of deliberately misleading or biased information, the manipulation of narrative or facts, and propaganda, something, of course, of which we are increasingly becoming aware of in the information war by Russia against Ukraine. Examples of disinformation include propaganda, including advertising, targeted fake news, Discord bots strategically magnifying discord, including trolling algorithms, and network incitement of mob violence. Now, during the last few minutes, I've given several, indeed many examples of the misuse of technology and using technical terms. Too many examples, perhaps, in one sense, for anyone to absorb unless any already engaged on this subject. So allow me now to give you just one example of how such misuse of technology works in practice. And that is the misuse of technology to oppress the Uyghurs in China, of which there are now estimated to be 2, even up to 3 million incarcerated in detention camps as a result. At the conference I mentioned earlier, Rahima Mahmud's evidence about the plight of the Uyghurs set a sombre and moving tone. As she told us, the Chinese government have invested huge sums of money into advanced surveillance technology, including facial recognition software, voice recognition software, DNA and data collection, constructing a huge network of cameras and physical checkpoints. All the information gathered on people is stored in what is called an integrated joint operation platform. The data is then used to classify Uyghurs by colour, blue, yellow or red, and therefore to classify their threat level. This has not only resulted in the mass criminalisation of the Uyghur population, but has also led them to question their own sense of self-worth and self-belief. So how does this work? The integrated joint operation platform is used by police and officials, and it's a mobile phone app used to collect data on individual Uyghurs in order for an assessment to be made as to whether someone should be arrested. The extent and penetration of the personal data collected is deeply concerning. Data is collected on individuals as they move about in public places, including from CCTV, by voice recognition, and even their relationship with others who may have political, or religious affiliations or convictions. The voice recognition software can monitor conversations not only from a mobile phone, but can also record a voice from 300 metres away while simultaneously blocking out the surrounding noise. The technology is now even used in schools. This is used to record what Uyghur children say in the classroom, even as young as kindergarten children, so that effectively children are the unwitting spies on their own parents. Key words are recorded and then detected by the app to flag concerns to the authorities so as to indicate dangerous or threatening tendencies. These include words like prayers or mosque, or even get together or gather. As soon as a keyword is picked up by the app, this will be fed in to the Integrated Joint Operations Platform app as suspicious activity, together with all the other data being collected about an individual. Someone can receive a colour for many reasons, such as simply eating in a restaurant where someone else with a red mark against their name is eating too. Once the information is gathered and reaches a certain level, an individual is flagged with a colour: red, yellow or blue. This indicates their threat level and how they will be treated. How they will be treated in particular as they move through the many checkpoints manned by police. Someone who is blue can pass through, though of course their colour can and may well change. If an individual is passing through a checkpoint with a yellow mark, an alarm goes off. If red, the police will automatically arrest the person immediately. In other words, it is the app, a computer, triggering an arrest. Once arrested, individuals can then be interrogated by computer too. Police can place an individual not in a normal chair for questioning, but in a tiger chair, where the body is completely locked and highly stressed, resulting in inevitable physical responses. During questioning, a computer will then monitor heightened changes in heartbeat and muscle movement, and on that basis, the computer can indicate the person must be guilty. Imprisonment can then be meted out. So, an individual can be surveyed, detected, arrested, interrogated and imprisoned by technology, simply because the computer says so. And surveillance technology of this nature is being sold around the world. According to an Open Technology Fund report of 2019, over 100 countries have purchased, imitated or received training on information controls from China and Russia.
Thank you. I'd really like to thank the Honourable Lady for bringing home just the true horrific nature of this technology and the way it's being employed to the Uyghurs in China. Would she agree with me that it's important that the work that she does and my honourable friend for Strangford does is constantly put into the government's forefront of their attention when we're discussing these issues, and particularly when it comes to overseas development aid for countries who may be seeking to implement these sort of measures themselves?
Thank the Honourable Member for that point and for his active engagement with the All-Party Group for Freedom of Religion or Belief. And it is heartwarming for me to know, particularly following the production of the Truro Review, now slightly over 2.5 years ago, how increasingly government is engaging on this issue and expressing not just concern but actually taking practical steps. To look at a country other than China for a moment, Dr. Daniel Aguirre of the University of Roehampton has explored the role of technologies in conflict and spoken of how in Myanmar, formerly Burma, the junta's primary aim there, following the recent coup, was to close or control digital communication, especially Facebook, as the primary mode of internet communication for coup resistance in Myanmar. Dr. Daniel Wary has detailed how misinformation has been used by the junta there to fuel ethnic tensions and violence. And we hear from other sources that the military there have used Facebook to spread propaganda against Muslims and against the Rohingya ethnic minority, and to justify attacks against their communities, and that disinformation has been used in Myanmar to discredit or malign Christians, rouse people's anger against them, or force people to practice rituals against their beliefs. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, stories of religious minorities being the harbinger of the coronavirus were spread. In Burma, in Myanmar, news of Christians directly receiving foreign aid was perpetrated falsely, encouraging the view that they should not receive government aid in that country. Now, I referred previously to non-state actors, that is, organisations other than governments misusing technology. An example is Daesh, the Islamic State terrorist organisation. They have used technology to recruit members and spread propaganda amongst minorities in Iraq, for example, against the Yazidis, and in Africa to inflame and justify violence against communities there. And I think it's deeply concerning that young people in particular using social media can be attracted into terrorist groups in this way. A statement on use of technology and religious freedom made at the July 2019 Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom, and that ministerial was a precursor to the 2022 conference which the UK is hosting this July. A statement then stated, we need to take seriously the need to counter the ability of terrorists to recruit and radicalise or inspire others to violence online while fully respecting freedom of expression. 3 years on, as the UK hosts this year's Ministerial on Freedom of Religion or Belief, responding to this challenge still remains at a concerning initial stage. Why is this? Well, one reason I believe that this is the case is the very complexity of the technicalities which I've endeavoured to describe today. I think that complexity has often inhibited human rights activists, including those who campaign on freedom of religion or belief, and I include myself in this, from tackling this subject. But we must do so, because the implications of failing to do so are, indeed already have been, so catastrophic. As Professor Francis Davis says, digital persecution is a challenge to the FoRB community specifically and the wider human rights community, because it requires them to speak together and find a common language to engage with the new institutions of persecution. This needs new analysis and new strategies of response. Professor Davis adds that we need to develop new leaders who are both digitally native and freedom of religion or belief and human rights savvy, representing a generational shift and meriting strategic investment by government, foundations and the corporate citizenship funds of tech companies. Now, in closing, I'm hopeful that the 2022 International Ministerial Conference on Freedom of Religion or Belief will explore more deeply the concerns...
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Fiona Bruce.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I hope that the 2022 International Ministerial Conference on Freedom of Religion or Belief in July will explore more deeply the concerns I've only been able to touch on today, and that we will commit to work together to address them. That governments, civil society activists, academics, members of the FoRB community, internationally and more importantly, even. Technology experts and providers will work with us, including global social media companies, to address digital persecution. There must be a comprehensive plan to address this, developed in a systematic and structured way. Concerns about surveillance, censorship and disinformation must become a standard element in our responses to persecution of freedom of religion or belief, rather than, as they are at present, an afterthought. As Ambassador Sam Brownbank, my predecessor as chair of the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance, has said, we are entering a very serious time of digital authoritarianism. How we react to it will be key.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And can I start by congratulating my honourable friend on securing this evening's debate, a very important debate as set out in her excellent speech this afternoon. And I also want to start by thanking her for everything that she does as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for freedom of religion or belief. Let me begin by making it absolutely clear that human rights must be protected both offline and online. New technologies and online communities provide a platform to strengthen democracies and human rights, but they also provide new tools for repression, persecution and censorship, which are putting open societies and democratic freedoms under pressure. The UK Government condemns all actions that violate human rights, whether offline or online. We share my honourable friends and other members' concern about the growing use of digital technology to target human rights defenders and civil society. We are troubled to see the increasing levels of gender-based harassment and abuse online. And we're strongly opposed to governments unlawfully shutting down or restricting access to the internet and social media. Everyone should be able to make the most of the positive opportunities that the online world offers. And this is why we're pursuing a three-pronged approach to promote internet access and protect human rights online. First, we're pressing states to uphold their human rights obligations and working with them to spread digital access to excluded groups. Second, we're campaigning for media freedom and leading international efforts to promote digital democracy. And third, we're working with international partners, including through the UN, to protect those whose rights are abused or violated online. On the first, we regularly raise issues of concern with other governments, in public and in private. We've led international efforts to hold China to account for the human rights violations we've heard about today. With the first, I will give way.
I'm really grateful to the Minister for giving way, and can I join her in congratulating the honourable member for securing this debate. Just before the pandemic, as part of the International Catholic Legislators Network, I had the great honour to meet Cardinal Zen, who's campaigned for religious freedom in China his whole life. We had to meet in a secret room at a time we couldn't announce because we had to run the gauntlet of Chinese demonstrations and surveillance from a hotel across the road. This was in Portugal, and this is the type of behaviour that's going on for people who want to practice their religion. It's not good enough, and the Minister's right to be setting out the point she's making currently.
I'm grateful for the intervention, and as I'm going to set out, we are kind of leading efforts to hold China to account for the human rights violations, and also in terms, and I will set out actually kind of some of the kind of conversations that have been had. But we are also the first country to lead a joint statement on China's human rights record at the UN, and last month the Foreign Secretary expressed her deep concern about the violations occurring in Xinjiang and Tibet in address to the UN Human Rights Council. And we've made clear our concerns about mass surveillance in Xinjiang, as my honourable friend was discussing, including as a joint statement alongside 42 other countries at the UN in October. We also raise our concerns with the Chinese authorities at the highest levels, and I personally raised these issues with the Chinese ambassador in London in December. Meanwhile, we continue to work with our international partners to address human rights violations taking place across the People's Republic of China. We've imposed sanctions on senior Chinese officials and introduced enhanced controls to block exports of technology that might facilitate human rights violations. The UK co-founded the Media Freedom Coalition in defence of journalists. This coalition has issued statements about the deteriorating media environments in Egypt, Belarus, Hong Kong, Myanmar and Russia, amongst others. And we've committed £3 million over 5 years to UNESCO Global Media Defence Fund, which has supported more than 1,700 journalists, including many of those who've received threats online. We also support media freedom through our development aid budget and have spent more than £400 million on this over the last 5 years. And last December, we joined the Freedom Online Coalition Task Force, which is committed to tackling the growing problem of internet exclusion and shutdowns. We also fund the Keep It On campaign run by the digital advocacy NGO Access Now. The campaign brings together a coalition of more than 240 organisations from 105 countries in a global effort to end internet restrictions and shutdowns. We also support projects that use the online world to foster open societies. Through our Digital Access programme, we're closing the gap for excluded groups, strengthening cyber security and spreading economic opportunities. Our most recent figures show just in 1 year the programme benefited 2.3 million people in almost 300 communities in Indonesia, Brazil, Nigeria, Kenya and South Africa. And within the United Nations, we're working to build a coalition of states committed to promoting digital access, protecting human rights online and countering disinformation. We've co-sponsored UN resolutions to urge member states and social media companies to combat misinformation, anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred. And we're also looking forward to hosting the Freedom and Religion or Belief Conference in July, as my honourable friend mentioned. And I would like, again, to thank her for everything that she's doing to support this conference in her role as the Special Envoy. The impact of digital technologies on freedom of religion or belief and human rights more broadly will be on the agenda. And in order to have influence abroad, of course, we must set an example at home. And we're committed to turning our online safety bill into law, requiring tech companies to tackle illegal activity and content on their platforms, including hate crime, harassment and cyber stalking. So to conclude, as I say, I'm incredibly grateful to my honourable friend for securing this afternoon's debate. The online space and the new digital technologies represent opportunities, Mr Deputy Speaker, but also challenges for the protection of human rights. And we've heard today about some of the terrible abuses and violations perpetrated through digital means.
Would the Minister give way for
I
a moment?
will.
Universe.
She speaks of terrible abuses and violations of human rights, and including of freedom of religion or belief, and earlier referred to a number of individuals being sanctioned. And I wonder whether she'd be good enough to take back to the Foreign Office the concerns that I have regarding the fact that Chen Guangguo in China has not yet been sanctioned by the UK, a man reportedly responsible for some of the most egregious infringements and violations of human rights against the Uyghurs there.
Minister.
I'm very grateful for her intervention, and I hear the points that she makes. Obviously, we keep all evidence and potential listings under close review, but obviously I could not possibly speculate on future sanctions, as that could limit their impact. But what I wanted to conclude on is that the government will continue to be a champion for human rights, both online and offline, promoting freedom and openness alongside our partners and allies. Thank you.